Hey everyone, my name is Bruce Jans and I'm going to be your instructor for this African Humanities course. And so I thought I would introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my background, tell you a little bit about where my interest in Africa comes from. I think through that you'll get a sense of maybe the kind of course this will be and the approach we'll take. I'll have other videos more specifically on the syllabus and things of that nature, but first, just to give you a bit of my own background. I've taught at UCF since 2003. My background is in Canada. I taught in Canada for 11 years before that, out in Alberta, and my graduate work was done near Toronto, University of Waterloo, actually. I also taught at University of Nairobi in Kenya, and I taught at Rhodes University in South Africa. That's in Grahamstown, so that's in what's known as the Eastern Cape, more or less directly south of Johannesburg, near the Indian Ocean. So I've done academic work there in Africa. I've also, originally though, I was there doing development work. Not just me, myself, but my partner at the time was a development worker, and she was working in East Africa. So initially, in quite a long time ago now, I was living near the border of Kenya and Uganda, near what's known as Mount Elgin. We were doing development work that helped especially women's groups to develop a kind of market-based livelihoods, so that they could grow things and take them to market, or make things, or things of that nature. There were health programs as well and things of that nature. So that was in the early 1990s. In 1997, I was in Rwanda for the summer, and if you know anything about Rwanda, you know that there was a brutal genocide. That happened in 1994, so I was there about 3 years after the genocide happened, and so I'm going to tell you more about that as the course goes. I also lived in Nairobi. As I mentioned, I taught at the University of Nairobi as well. Then I tended to go after East Africa. I tended to go to South Africa a lot more. So, in South Africa, I have worked with a number of different people. As I mentioned, I've taught at Rhodes University, but I've also worked on projects with others, and spoken at a number of different universities and so forth. One of my major areas of interest is African philosophy, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that during this course. This is not a philosophy course per se, it's a humanities course, so that we're going to be looking at a broad range of cultural products. One of those cultural products, though, is philosophy, so we're definitely going to include some of that. So my interest in Africa really comes from having, fairly regular experience in Africa. And so from my own background, I've been always interested in the question of what it means to live on the margins, and those could be those could be physical margins, those could be intellectual margins, those could be social margins. All of these things are places where people have to figure out how to make a go of it, how to make a life, when they don't have the advantages of mainstream culture or something like that. And so, as a philosopher, I'm interested in, what does that mean when people are thinking about the kind of intellectual basis for their world, for their culture. Quite often Africans have been told that they're not really capable of having a philosophy. Philosophy is a product of the West. It's a product of Europe or North America, and Africans simply pick up whatever has been done elsewhere, or develop something that's really not very sophisticated. I don't subscribe to that position. I think that there actually is some extremely interesting work, historically and in the current age in Africa, philosophically. So, for me, that was kind of the impetus to try and figure out, what good work is being done there that we're just not seeing, that we're missing outside of Africa. Of course, I am Canadian, working in the U.S. So there's always an issue of someone like me going into Africa. I'm not going to go in and say I have answers, because I don't. I'm going to go in and say, there have been a lot of misunderstandings, and let's talk. And that kind of that's opened up a lot of avenues, I think. And so for me, what I've noticed when I've been in Africa has been an openness of people, and a desire to share culture, share ideas, to be taken seriously, as any of us would want, of course. And so, that's kind of what keeps bringing me back, apart from the fact that it's in many places extremely beautiful and extremely fascinating and all of the rest of that. So, so for me, that's part of who I am. That's part of my background. For me, Africa is, yes, a subject that I teach, but also, something that I have a real pull to. So that's some of what, some of that's going to leak into this course. I'm going to try and show you the stuff that I get excited about when I'm in Africa. Some of that's going to be in video form, some of it's going to be in other kind of artifact form or readings or whatever. But I just think that there's the entire continent is vastly misunderstood, and and there's just so much interesting and good stuff that goes on there that I think it's worth our time to figure out what that good stuff is. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my interest in Africa. I've worked on a lot of other things as well. I've worked in the notion of place and space across many different disciplines. So questions of what does it mean to be in a place, what does it mean to desire a place, to lose a place, to yearn for a place. How do we construct a place? What goes into it? What are we not seeing when we're in that place? How does that place infuse who we are? All of those sorts of questions are of interest to me. And so for me, of course, that comes partly from, looking at Africa and saying this is a strange and yet interesting place to someone like me who didn't grow up there. So I do work on that. I have done work on a number of other areas. I just finished a grant along with some other people called Space, Science, and Spirituality, in which we looked at how astronauts talked about their experiences while in space. Many of them talk about having experiences of awe and wonder. And so we tried to figure out just what does that mean for them, and is it possible for us to try and simulate those and trigger those in a virtual environment on Earth here. So we had a large virtual environment, and we had people wired up to try and take some biometric readings and did interviews with them and all of that sort of thing. So, we got, I think, some very interesting data, came to some interesting conclusions on, what does it mean to experience something totally unprecedented, something you didn't expect. All right, so I've done work on that kind of thing. I do work on urban areas, cities. I do work on the environment. I've done work in history of mysticism. That was actually my graduate work. So, I also am the director of the Center for Humanities and Digital Research at UCF here. And that's a center focused on digital humanities mainly, but also humanities in general. So we look at the questions of how do humanities scholars use digital tools to discover new things, to create new texts for them to examine, to simulate, let's say, historical events, to bring data sets together, so let's say demographic sets and things like that, to understand the kind of humanities sorts of content that is not easily accessible, examining using the traditional tools of humanities scholars, such as texts or archives or things of that nature. So that's another hat that I wear. So there's a lot of different things that I do. They kind of come together in a kind of weird mashup in my own mind. But Africa does fit into all of those things. I'm interested right now, and I'm working with some people on what does the digital humanities look like in Africa. We sometimes think about Africa as a place that is backwards somehow when it comes to digital things, and that in many ways nothing could be further from the truth. There's some extremely cutting edge, great stuff going on there, including in the humanities. So so there's a lot of kind of different threads to what I've done over the years. So you're going to see bits and pieces of that as we go through this course. You know, I'm happy that you're along for the ride. I think it's going to be great fun. I'm going to try and blow you away with how amazing some of the cultural work in Africa actually has been. So that's what we're planning on doing, and you know, I'll see you in another video.